In this tutorial, we're going to create a object-oriented JavaScript countdown widget with just basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We'll use a constructor pattern to create a new ES6 class that will actually activate and count down the clock automatically. You might use this on marketing sites to kind of give that concept of a pressure of a time limit, something of that effect, whether it's relative to a sale going on, or maybe it's something relative to a quiz or something, who knows. But this might be practical in any kind of web-based world, even honestly in mobile world. So let's get started with the JavaScript component. I'm going very bare bones here with some style sheets and CSS and a basic HTML file. We're going to import the script from another file right here as a relative path. And inside we'll start by creating a class called countdown. If you're looking at the autocomplete here, it's going to be a AI widget I use called Super Maven. It's the free tier, so if you want to check that out, you can Google that essentially. And we'll go ahead and kind of do some autocompletions based on learned behaviors AIs typically do these days. If it is annoying, I'll probably kick it off my code editor for the purposes of learning, but just something to say, want to mention up front. Here I've got a constructor. We're going to pass in some defaults, basically some options relative to our patterns here. So I'm going to first define what item we're going to be focusing on. For each new instance of a countdown class, we want to have a selector, so some sort of thing that we're targeting, like a div on a page. And then also some options we can pass if you want to add anything to it. So we need to say this dot element is going to be, document query selector or selector, essentially that. We'll have our this.options to pass in any additional options as necessary. I want to add one called this.interval ID, so some sort of interval we can set if you want to. I'll start with null by default. And don't really love semicolons. We might need them for that world though. Let's see. And then this dot remaining time is another constructor we'll set, and we'll just say this dot options dot time, or seconds, excuse me, because we want to pass seconds through. We'll keep it kind of a smaller countdown with that regard. So in the class now we have this constructor that takes two parameters. It's going to be the selector for the HTML element, and then essentially where the countdown is displayed. Here I've got some basic just starting point, just some actual content there. We'll add dynamic content here so it's not default. With JavaScript, the options object will contain the initial countdown time in seconds. So we'll start with a function inside here. We'll call it start, and that's going to say take this interval ID. And man, AI is pretty great. So it's doing what I want here. We want to close that interval and the method there. Inside we'll say this dot remaining time. We can set it to you could say minus equals 1 or just minus minus for shorthand. Should equal the same thing. Then we'll say this dot update, and we'll say if this dot remaining time is less than equal to 0, we're going to say this dot stop. And outside of the construct of that, inside the interval, we want to do this every 1,000 milliseconds. So like almost basically every second, we'll take that into effect. So let's go and add now the stop method. Since we called that, we have to reference it somehow. Let's close that function off. It's just another function in this class we can call and target, and we'll say clear interval. It's part of JavaScript library. We'll say this interval.id, and I need to spell that better. All right, so I did a bunch of typos there. The AI kind of got a little unwieldy, so I'm going to update those right now. Sorry about that. We have our clear interval function here. It's going to set it to this interval ID. So we've got that in multiple places here. And then also on this stop method, we're going to say this dot interval, essentially set it to null again. It gives us a starting point. Finally, we called update earlier as well, so let's define what that is. And that's going to be this dot element text content, we'll just update that and say this dot remaining time, and that should be good. So to put this into practice, we would need a way to new up the instance. Since this is a class constructor of an ES class, we can call it directly. I'll define it as a countdown, and we'll say new. The new keyword lets you new up a class instance here, countdown. Since AI is working in my favor, I'm going to just tab forward there. We could set the seconds to whatever you want. I'll do 60 to start, and that should give us a starting point. Then we could say countdown start, and that should kick it off over here, assuming we don't have errors. So let's look at our console log. We've got cannot set properties null, text content. Let's see what our 58. So we're getting the content here. Let's see if it's not null. This dot element is null. Let's see. We've got countdown is our HTML countdown. Oh, I think I might need to actually add this down to the body at the bottom of the page. It could be a DOM content loaded thing. So let's add it down here. There we go. Great. All right, so trying this out, we've got our scripts here. You could format this time in another way if you want to go a step further in doing so. Recommend that. You can look at the MDN docs to get a feel for what that looks like. And essentially, when we reload this page, assuming you don't have typos like I did, you can set the time, and it's counting down by 1 second here. If you want to extend the seconds to, say, 120 seconds, it'll start there and go down. So it's really relative to what time you want to set here. If you want to extend this to more than just seconds, you could, based on minutes, seconds. You might need to do something fancy with the time formatting here to enable that to be more like an hour setup. And of course, 0 here is not going to really work too well. So there it goes, counts down. This is a very simple version of this. If you want to extend it and put like some sort of pause mechanism in there, you could totally do so. So something like pause, and we'll say if not this dot paused, and you pretty much need to go and say, if it's basically you could extend this class if you really wanted to. So you make yet another class here, maybe down below it. We'll say class countdown with pause, and then you could extend countdown this way. It's kind of the object pattern. And the constructor here would inherit the stuff from the countdown. So you could call super and pass the selector and options through. Then you could set the pause pattern there if you want to have that. We'll say is paused instead of paused. Let's kind of give it a Boolean type of property. Again, object oriented there. If you have any background to that, that might make a little more sense. If not, that's okay. Just kind of a construct we use. And then for pausing, you could say just check if that flagged is paused or not. And you can say the inverse with the bang there. And then we'll say is paused. Excuse my editor with thousands of things in the view. Then we can say that clear interval bit again. We'll do the interval ID, and then we'll set this dot is paused to true. That gives you the ability to go ahead and pause it should you need to. And then assuming you want to restart it from that pause state, you could maybe do something like resume. We'll say if this dot is paused is true. In this case, we just did that from the pause state. It's going to be set to true at that point. Then we could say this dot start again and set it to false. So relatively simple concepts. Each method kind of has one job, which is good. That's kind of an object-oriented pattern. You want to kind of dumb it down in that sense. So now if we have our countdown set up here, you could say countdown start, countdown. We get all those methods between both those classes now, and then you could say countdown resume. So we've got start, and it could pause, and then it resumes after some time. So maybe, oh, my bad here. We have the wrong instance variable sets, or the class. We need the pause class. Now we should be able to do this. Should pause. It did fire. You would want to probably do something a little more granular there to make sure these are kind of async, but that is a kind of concept you could go. There is the concept of adding like a callback function as well if you want to go that route. So you could do something along the lines of countdown, come up here to your original one and add this dot on complete and say options on complete. That gives you the ability to do something on the stop method. So say if this dot on complete is true, dot on complete, something to that effect. Maybe you have another method, say on complete. You could do it outside of the function here as well. So like countdown on complete. Do the function there and pass complete. I'm going to reset that real quick so it does it, but we should get that on complete at the very end here. There we go. So you can call essentially once the countdown's done. Maybe that's something like, maybe it's a course that's coming live. It signifies to your backend that says, okay, turn the course, onboarding off, all that stuff, if it's actually doing something. A lot of times these don't actually do anything. It just gives the impression they are. A little bit of psychology involved, but if it happened to, you could do something with that. So hopefully that was useful. Sorry it was a little bit scattered with the AI and stuff in play here. I'm just trying that out, so it's a little new to me, but this should give you the confidence maybe to go forward and create your own countdown widget. Just using basic ES6. I'm not using any plugins, no NPM, nothing here. So it's all built in the browser these days, and it's pretty useful. So check that out and let me know in the comments how your results ended up. All right, so long for now.